of people here today, so thanks for giving up some of your time to join us. I know we're going to have a fantastic discussion and chat, and I was just really sort of talking a bit to my colleagues about your background and everything. So I'll sort of, I just really kick off by saying, you know, it's really, really good that once again we've got a fantastic person to take part in our leadership series. I know that these have really gained traction over the past few months, and again, just very quickly to remind everyone, if you haven't already, just turn off your camera, just so that we can make sure that when we do record it, it's just going to be myself and Sharon that appears on the film. But I just want to say how delighted I am to welcome Councillor Sharon Thompson, who is the Cabinet Member for Vulnerable Children and Families at Birmingham City Council. It's interesting, did you know that Birmingham is the most populated local council in the UK and home to well over 1 million people? So effectively Britain's second city. In fact, Birmingham City Council is actually the largest council in Europe. So that's a huge, interesting challenge. And as you can imagine, for Birmingham and most other councils, that they have enormous pressures right now with tighter budgets and, you know, dealing with COVID. And so, as you can imagine, you know, the challenges facing Sharon in her own particular role are huge. Just by way of background, Sharon took up the current post she has earlier in the summer. Before that, she was in charge of housing. And but along the way, what you'll find today is that she has an incredible story, overcoming her own personal challenges when she was younger. And you know, I think hearing some of that today should serve as inspiration for us all, really. So without further ado, welcome, Sharon, and I'm delighted today you can join us.
Thank you very much, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me to come along for this chat, and I'm looking forward to sort of sharing my insight, stories, wisdom, or learning from other people as well, so that would be great.
Yeah, well, we've certainly got a lot of that, and I suppose by way of an introduction, could you just outline a bit more about what you're doing right now, what your brief is and what your challenges are in your current post?
Okay, so I'm the Cabinet Member for Vulnerable Children and Families, and that's a political position, so it's almost, you know, the leader of the council delegates responsibility to his cabinet members, so I'm part of his team. In that portfolio, I have early years, I have SEND, so that's Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Department. I also have what's in our Children's Trust, which is children's safeguarding, youth justice, corporate parenting, and our care leavers. And I guess my remit is more so the high level policy direction for the city in those particular areas. Some of the decisions around budget and the higher level decisions that need to take place, and obviously holding the council to account for delivering on those things and those services in line with some of the things that we as councillors promised the electorate we would do when we stood for election.
It's probably going to be one of the most important roles there is in the council, over and above housing, because I mean, I know in the past there's been issues around vulnerable children and families, and of course you have your fair section of poverty in Birmingham. So for you, one of the big ticket items, I guess, is how you promote social mobility and how you know, deal with the issues that come with that, with vulnerable families and children.
So, yeah, so with this portfolio, it definitely comes with challenges. I was asked to move over to this portfolio because of the significant challenges that was in there, particularly around SEND. There's a number of issues of things where we need to do better on. This particular cabinet role is different to the rest of them because this one actually comes with statutory responsibilities, and particularly when it comes around children. So it's a very important brief. Albeit my old brief was very important too. I brought homelessness into this brief as well, because I'm very passionate about homelessness, but also I have a thing about early intervention and prevention. So we want to get upstream with some of that, so it changes the way that we deliver for people. So huge responsibility.
Because it's interesting you mentioned homelessness, because your own backstory, you yourself as a teenager were homeless with a young child. I mean, it doesn't get much more challenging than that, does it, when you were that young?
No, so I was homeless at, I first became homeless at 16. Wasn't resilient enough to be street homeless. I slept on the streets for one night and I wasn't resilient enough to do it for any longer. And I went to a place called St Basil's, which is a youth hostel in Birmingham, and they sort of looked after me. And I always say that I was never supported, they invested in me. So they supported me throughout that period of time. It was very challenging. There was times when I went for days only eating porridge for breakfast, lunch and dinner and having 50 pence in my pocket. So it was quite challenging, but to have gone from there and now to be able to oversee homelessness in the city that I was born in, it's a huge deal for me, because it means that I can help to shape things for the better.
It's an amazing story, and I suppose at the time you probably had a big choice. Do you let the situation you're in define you, and you almost become a victim of it, or do you really try to say, right, actually, I've got more things to do in my life, and this is how I'm going to do it? It almost becomes a foundation, a building block from which you can then prosper. Because you became a magistrate as well, didn't you? I mean, your journey has been amazing since then.
Yeah. So I had this attitude actually, that there was two little things. There was one, I never wanted, once I had my son, I was my son at age 19, and I never wanted his role models to be a pop star on the television, a hip hop star or anything else like that. I wanted my life to be his role model. That was my biggest ambition, and still is. And then in terms of the rest of it, I had this attitude, I still do, that I won't be a victim of life issues, but I'll be victorious through them, which means I'll use my life experience to try and challenge and change the system so that other people don't have to go through some of the things that I went through. And part of that, I've got a big thing about personal development, because I think that's one thing that all individually, you know, there's many things in life we can't control, even in our working lives, but actually we can control those areas. So I had this attitude, and those that are old enough to remember, there used to be an advert called L'Oreal, and their phrase was always, because I'm worth it. And that was my attitude. I'm going to do this because I'm worth it. And I became a magistrate in my late 20s, early 30s, which was very different. Most jobs that I'd been in, I'd been promoted within 9 months to 12 months. Because I always wanted to do better and be better. So like most people have a to-do list of things that they want to do in life, and I have a to-be list. So I want to, you know, it's who do I want to be, how do I want to show up in life, and how do I want to be remembered, and how do I want people to think of me. And part of that is building on my life experiences. So yeah, I just really enjoy learning and growing. And I think that if you go into any leadership position, you have to be willing to learn at all accounts, to unlearn, relearn, and everything else that comes with it.
Because there's so many people, particularly our trainees, who are setting out in their career, and they have that choice to make, don't they? To actually go out and make something of themselves, and to show what they're all about, and to own their own opportunities in life. And in the same way you have, I mean, the way that you sort of have gone from where you started out and where your life could have gone, but you've actually done something truly amazing, and you've actually got yourself in a position now, as you say, where you can actually influence and affect other people's lives in a positive way through your own hard work. I mean, did you have a lot of support during those tough years? I mean, what sort of got you through that really tough period when you were homeless and probably, you know, thinking what do I do next?
I think, I mean, when I was homeless, it was incredibly tough. I mean, those that know Birmingham well, I remember I used to walk from Moseley to Washwood Heath on a Sunday with my bag of washing, and just for a Sunday dinner at my aunt's house and get my clothes washed, and then I'd walk back, you know, and literally me and my friend fighting over 50 pence because that's all we had for a whole week. So that was really tough. But, you know, you have decisions to make of what kind of, what do you want your life to look like? And I just felt like there was more to life than that for me. And there was a girl that we lived parallel lives, and her name happened to be Sharon as well. We lived in the same hostel, and we had the same life. But I still see Sharon now, and unfortunately she still is homeless, and you know she's lost her hair, and you know, and it's about how much you're willing to take support, ask for support, and you know, if you don't ask, you don't get. But it's just about really valuing your own worth and where you want to go and pushing forward. So for me, and again, one of the things I always say to people, Andrew, is about the first thing that you should always learn is about yourself. So you have to learn who you are, what you're about, your good side and your dark side. And I think that's so important. So I know, although I might be coming across as quite chatty to you now, naturally, I am an introvert. So naturally, I'm the quiet one that won't necessarily say a lot if I'm in a social group. So that means I'm the one that doesn't really like going to the networking parties or the networking dinners. That's not really my gig. I'd rather be at home in my onesie, if I'm honest. But what I will do then is I will find strategies that help me to have the same outcomes of people who are in that particular space. So for instance, and I'm just going to give you an example. I'm not the one that likes to go to the networking thing, as I said. So what I will do is it's going to sound a little bit stalkerish. I don't stalk people, but people on Twitter who I follow, who I genuinely admire, who might be nationally, CEOs, anything else like that, I will reach out to them and I will say to them, look, I admire your style of leadership. And I was just wondering whether you could have an hour's conversation with me, or could I just come and shadow you for the day? Because I want to know how my world affects your world and how we can make that better between the two for better outcomes for people. And I do that here at a cabinet member level. And I will go and shadow people and I get a better understanding. And actually what it also does is people get to know you better. And then, you know, that old saying where people say it's not who you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, I actually say it's not what you know, who you know, it's who knows you. So by doing that process and meeting people and understanding their role and spending a little bit of time with them, when opportunities come up for speaking or to sit on an advisory board or anything else like that, you then become in the forefront of their mind also because they've connected with you. So I'm really proud at the moment that I'm sitting on the Cllr Commission, which is a national independent commission. There's only 17 people on there, which includes Sir Bob Cllr, who's chairing it, and the Metro Mayor for Manchester, Andy Burnham. So there's some really good players on there. And then there's me representing Birmingham and the West Midlands, because I spent time with someone and they said, oh, actually, you need to speak to her because she's quite passionate about that and she's got lived experience and blah, blah, blah. And I ended up being asked to go on there. So I think it's really important that you just kind of, if you don't ask, what's the worst anyone's going to say is no. That's it. And then, you know, who can connect you to that person?
It's such an important thing because I'm the same as you, really. What's the worst someone can say sometimes? But why don't you think out of the box in the first place and come up with those ideas rather than just doing the same old, same old? It doesn't matter where you are in your career. If you're starting out as a young person, if you're middle management, get out there, ask the questions, make your network, get to know people, and put yourself in that position, because there you're going to learn so much more. You're going to meet more people. You're going to rub off their ideas together much more effectively, and you can be much more effective as a person. So that's a really interesting bit of learning, actually, for our own teams and people around the country. You know, how do you stand out? And that's the thing, is that how do you stand out? How do you make yourself that person rather than just being someone else that's in the crowd and not really noticed?
Yeah, I think that's really essential, Andrew. And one of the things, again, in terms of turning my homelessness experience into where I am at the moment. When I was a backbench councillor, so I'd been elected, I was a normal councillor, and I made a promise to a group of rough sleepers that if I got elected, I couldn't definitely get them changed, but I'd make sure their voices were heard. And I went on this bit of a mantra. So as a backbench councillor, I decided that I wanted to write a manifesto. I'd never done it before, but I had to convince my group that we needed to write a manifesto just on homelessness. And it was about being willing to flex. So I called on my colleague, John Cotton, because I recognised he was better at policy than I was, and I was honest about that. I called on Liam Byrne, who was the MP, to help us, because I recognised that he would be able to bring me the connection in Westminster that I didn't have. And between us, I kind of knew that, you know, you understand people's personalities. I didn't care at the point about who got the credit, but the reality of it was I wanted the leverage. And the leverage of those two people meant that we had a launch, which had a shadow minister come and launch it for us. We had, we hit national media because of that. And it's about kind of stripping away the ego and looking at actually, what is it I need to do? I think the other thing was in that learning was the fact that I was prepared to be putting myself out there, shape something that had never been done before in the city, on the council, and utilise my ideas and build a team around me, because that then showed people that, one, I was willing to roll up my sleeves and get in there, and about my work ethic and my drive and my ideas. As a consequence of that, I then got asked to be the city's first cabinet advisor on homelessness. And then when it came to appointing to cabinet, the leader said to me, you wrote the manifesto, you need to deliver it. And then I put in and I became a cabinet member. Yeah. So sometimes it's about doing some, creating and carving out your own space and being willing to do that. Doesn't always work, but showing willingness and attitude is a big thing, step forward. Sometimes you might not have the academic or the skill, but honestly, attitude has a huge part to play in that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you come across as a very purpose-driven person, and that has got to be defining for anyone. If you want to achieve something, not just for yourself, but for the organisation, the people you work with, you have to have that purpose, that drive, that energy, don't you?
I think you do, and I think you have to, and again, it goes back to that thing, yes, drive and passion is really important, and it goes back to that thing about, I have what I call a toolkit. I love arts and craft and I draw it. So I have a toolkit, and I think, what are the things that I need in my toolkit? Where are my weaknesses? So who do I need to leverage to bring that kind of strength in? You know, what do I need to bring to the table for any particular time? So I think that is absolutely essential, and it has helped me a lot in my career. There's been a number of things, leadership styles. You know, everyone has a different core leadership style, but I just think that, you know, you utilize some of them as tools in your actual toolkit to be able to use for the right situation and circumstance, and bringing people together that can help you to achieve something.
And how, in your experience, have you been able to build those strong teams? Because obviously our people all about working with teams, having strong teams, leading teams, and as they progress throughout their careers, they get bigger teams to lead, but they still have to have those defining leadership principles that help them be successful. And I suppose I'm really keen to know how do you bottle up some of the leadership skills you've shown that's got you from where you were to where you are now?
I think some people lead teams, but they don't always engage with teams. And I think that's a big thing. I have a huge portfolio, and I had a huge portfolio in my previous cabinet position. And, you know, my role is strategic role. It's not operational. But what I would do is I would carve out a set of time, which was usually August, where I would do a tour of my portfolio. Now, when you're in a leadership position, people almost treat you like it's Ofsted. So you turn up and they put the best people in front of you and everything's all looking spanky. So I always don't like being chaperoned on a visit. So I would just be quite, oh yeah, you can leave me alone now and I can get on with it. And I will ask the question, what is it that I can do better that helps you on the ground in your role? What is it that we can change at a top end level? What are your challenges? So I will ask those questions, and I will ask people what their ideas. I've shadowed people who sit in the call centre. My last portfolio had bereavement services. I went there so often because the staff said nobody ever met them, was willing to go and meet them because they worked in the mortuary. I went there so often because I wanted them to feel like they were cared for. So that's a big thing. And when people feel like they're a part of a team where someone actually cares and they're showing up for them, that's when you tend to get the best out of people. One of the little principles I have is I will send an email on a Friday and I'll pick someone who's done something, and I'll just say, do you know what, I really appreciate that you did X, Y, and Z. Now that challenges me to make sure I know that people are doing stuff that's like X, Y, and Z. But again, it's that people value in there. And I think, but you have to be careful in terms of your personality type, because I can be quite laughy, jokey, which can almost translate as not serious, but I can be very serious. So it's about striking that balance that people understand the boundaries and, you know, when I say, oh, that's not acceptable, people know that I mean that that's not acceptable. And it's really just balancing that and building a respectful relationship and understanding that ultimately, yes, we are in a position of leadership, but this is a jigsaw puzzle and everyone's got their part to play, and I'm a part of the jigsaw. So it's about sometimes stripping away the ego, the leadership ego is what I call it, every now and then, and just making sure people feel that you're available, even though you can't always be available. So I've done over the COVID period, a member, they said to me, there's someone in the staff team that wanted to meet with you. And I said, yeah, okay, sure. And they came along to my briefing. He said, I want to do a housing festival. I said, knock yourself out, go on then. He said, will you come and do and ask me anything? And I did a Teams live with the whole housing department workforce where they could ask me anything. And I think it's things like that that makes a difference. And I have to do a lot of speeches and things like that. And I always say to people, you know, it's not me. I'm the face of this. It's these people behind me. So I always make sure that I've got examples that I can bring up of the good practice that's taking place, but also be very clear with everybody where we need to pull up our socks.
Yeah, I love the idea about just picking out someone and emailing them, because that's probably the last thing they ever expected, is to get a nice email, a bit of recognition, but that must make them feel so good, and that themselves, that positivity must just radiate, and that's it. The positivity you seem to bring to things, it must have such an impact on other people, because we've seen bad leadership, people who are aloof, and you know, they rule by fear, don't they, as opposed to respect, and you're very humble, you know, you appreciate that to be successful you need other people's support, and intellectually it's not just about you, and to get that balance right, because that's how you build that loyal team, isn't it?
It is absolutely, when you build that loyal team, and also looking at trying to build a vision together. I'm quite a collaborative leader, I think, and it's about some of that, but again, it is that balance that you know, that you will, you know, my officers that I work with, they know that I will defend them when they're in the right space. I would never publicly criticize them. I will never let anybody else throw them under the bus. That's for sure. But they also know I will never defend the indefensible. And I think as a leader, you have to be crystal clear with people. So they all know, starting from working with me, I will say to them, look, I don't like unnecessary surprises. So if it's an emerging issue, come and speak to me when it's emerging so we can stop it from turning into a crisis. You rock up with the crisis when you could have told me when it was emerging. That's when I'm not going to be a happy person, and I'm going to be like, that's unacceptable. So when people say, let's not get me into that space, and you know, we don't want to publicly have to head off a crisis, so let's get things as early as possible. So I think it's really important that we're clear with people, just how we like to work, really, and just it makes it better for everyone and a better working environment.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, the whole issue about surprises and working together, and I know that in the construction industry, you know, customers hate surprises, and that's one of the things that we focus on, is to deal with the issue but not make surprises. I mean, from as your career flourished, I mean, and what do you think over the past 10 or so years has sort of made a difference to your career? Do you think as it was flourished, what's been the guiding light, really?
I think there's a number of things. I think there is a golden thread through it. I think there's one is probably that I'm just keen to I just want to make change, and I want to grow as an individual. I think the other thing is I've been very fortunate that I think that there's been people that have been in my life at different points who have invested in me. So they've seen something in me that I might not have seen in myself. They've given me mentoring opportunities, whether that's loose mentoring or structured mentoring. I think that's made a huge difference. And I think there's been some defining decisions that I've made in my career about stepping into new roles that were going to make me absolutely grow. So becoming a magistrate, you know, I've got a gold tooth and I've got dreadlocks. I don't look like your typical magistrate. I don't talk like the typical magistrate. So going into spaces and learning and growing in a different environment is really important. I think becoming a councillor was a big step, and it's quite interesting that I used to work for Birmingham City Council for nearly a decade before stepping into the political space. And Councillor Ward, who's now the leader of the council, he was the ward councillor of the area that I looked after as a community worker. And one day I said to him, I really don't know what you do as a councillor. And he was like, okay, then I'll shadow me. And I went, okay, then I will. And then, you know, that was a defining moment. I think going into cabinet been incredible for me in terms of my growth. But also there's been moments that I didn't, sometimes you just have to go with the flow. And there's been moments that I didn't really realise were significant in my life or were going to be, but they ended up being. So when I was younger and I'd come out of the homelessness phase and I was a single mum at this point, and I started working in housing. I worked in a housing office, and I started a voluntary organisation wanted me to come along and hear my voices, and they were supporting me in terms of my confidence. And in the end, they used to take me places and they used to say, can you speak to these official people about why the system doesn't work for everyday people like you? And I'll be like, yeah, okay then. And I'll be, sharing my insights and my thoughts. I didn't realise I was in the Home Office and I didn't really know what that actually meant or what it was. Although I was speaking to ministers, because it wasn't a part of my world. So sometimes you have to be, you have to be willing to step into spaces that you feel uncomfortable in. And learn new things. And my motto, I think a lot of people say is, if I'm ever the most important person in the room, I'm in the wrong room because I'll stop learning. That's the reality of it all.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, and I love the idea about mentors, people supporting you, people backing you, and I think that's so important. It doesn't matter where you are in your career, starting as a trainee, middle management, senior management, you need that respect, that support, those people out there that are going to believe in you, and you feel like they believe in you, because that gives you the confidence, doesn't it? And I just think that, and for our own people, that's important. And I know that our own people are very conscious about that, making sure that they have that sort of network of support around them, because that really helps to bring out the best and give them self-belief and self-confidence. Because I guess from your perspective, as your self-confidence, self-belief, self-esteem to some grew, so did your potential. I mean, you had this tremendous potential, but that could have been buried away, that potential. So it's unlocking that potential, isn't it, really?
It's definitely unlocking the potential, and sometimes you don't see it, but it is unlocking the potential. And like I said, going into those uncomfortable spaces. So for instance, I'm dyslexic. I left school with, I think, 4 GCSEs, that was an A to C, and I convinced myself that I was not academic. I'm not academic. Oh, I can't do that. I'm not academic. And then I said to myself, you need to rewrite the narrative. And that was very difficult for me to do. So I decided to join the Open University, and I started studying through the Open University. Because it was the only viable way, because I was a single mum, I was working full time. It was the only viable way for me to get a qualification. And again, I stepped out of my comfort zone. And even then, I promised my son, and sometimes it's about making a promise to someone else. I promised my son that I would stick in education as long as he did. So now I'm still studying now. I go on and I'll study other things. So I think it's really important about unlocking that potential and taking the key of the padlock, so to speak. And again, just being willing to do different things. And it's not always about formal ways of learning. Some of my best ways of learning have been through informal conversations. It's been through, can I spend 1 hour with you? And 1 hour with a wise person could be worth as much as a degree, as far as I'm concerned. And actually volunteering to shadow and do things that were different. So I think that's absolutely essential, but you've got to be willing to go into the uncomfortable space, but then break through the uncomfortable. I think it's essential. And I think everybody should have a plan in their mind for their own personal development. It doesn't matter what organisation you work for. You should always have a bit of a plan in your head of what you want to personally achieve. And actually, whatever workplace you're in or whatever situation, how can you leverage that experience to help you build on the blocks that are in your personal plan? So at the moment, I've taken on a really big portfolio and it's really uncomfortable for me with a lot of challenges. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to improve my leadership and development. So now I'm doing a level 7 in leadership and development, strategic leadership and management, and utilising these experiences in that space because it's part of my personal development.
Also, you put me to shame. I mean, I wish I had as much energy as you to do half of that. I mean, what you do is almost like, apart from when you're asleep, you're productive in almost every single waking moment you have. I think when you've been through,
I mean, I came from a homeless, and I often say loosely that I was a homeless teenager. And I think the bit that I don't often say what that means is, so I was 16, I'd left home. You know, I was living in hostels. Sometimes it was frightening. I have friends that are no longer here because they've died. And you know, I've known people who have been shot. You know, that's me being straightforward. I've had friends that have ended up going to prison, and I know people that have had substantial sentences. I know people that have ended up going down the route of just having lots of children or not going into any kind of career or not thinking like that. When you're in those resilient spaces, when you hear a gunshot go off, or you've seen something, or you know someone that's been through something horrific or traumatic, it makes you take stock of life. And I think you almost start to build up a mindset, and going through those experiences to survive life at times was like a military operation. Literally, it was trying to navigate through systems that wasn't fit for purpose for young people like me, and navigating through a really awkward lifestyle, so to speak, and people. So once you start building up that kind of navigation, it kind of carries you through every bit of life. And for me, I don't take none of that for granted. So people say to me, how do you get the energy to do all that? Oh my goodness. And do you actually have a life? Do you have friends? I get to hang out with my friends and everything all the time, because it's about being organised and making sure I have the right people in my life that will support me to do the right things. Naturally, ask me to manage my own diary and I'll be in 3 places overbooked at the same time. But I have an amazing person that helps me with those things. So you have to kind of build your team around you, and you have to build who your supporters are as well, because there's enough haters out there that will tell you that, you know, or try and put a dampener on your plans. Keep your plans silent on many things that you are crafting away on, but also make sure you build your own team of resilience around you, because that's absolutely essential in any form of leadership. Yeah. I'm quite fortunate to be in a really high leadership position in terms of as a cabinet member. But it does not get any easier as you climb up that ladder. So you just have to learn to build the resilience around you more.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm sure our teams will relate to that, because as you become more responsible, as you have, there's still the issue of adversity and dealing with the haters and dealing with the people that want to make it hard for you. Now, that could be people that we deal with through, you know, through other companies, not necessarily within our own business, but people that are deliberately trying to make it tough for you, trying to maybe trip you up, and how you deal with that and how you manage that. And that's a really interesting learning. How do you manage the haters out there that don't want you to succeed?
I think you have to, I guess my world's a bit different because it's political, and you could imagine it gets very tricky in politics. But again, it's that resilience thing. And like I said, when I talk about the military operation, so I know that for some things I'll engage with people and I can see, okay, this isn't about the system, this is you being personal with me. So I will just go, I've got a job to get on with, so I'm going to block out the noise. So I'm blocking out the noise. So the stuff, you know, I get trolled on Twitter. I'm blocking out the noise because I haven't got the headspace to entertain that, because I've got something else to do for vulnerable children in this city. So 1 is around blocking out the noise. 2 is around making sure you've got I have what I call it a medicine bag. It sounds very weird, but I've literally got this thing where I wrote down all the things that make me feel uplifted. So when things are starting to get to me, I kind of look at the bag and think, what am I pulling out? Sometimes it's a person. So sometimes I'll phone my cousin in the middle of the day and just rant, as all people do, just to get it off my chest. Other times it might be that I need to go to the gym or I need to do other things, but you have to build the things that make your mind resilient. And then it's also about being clear of what the plan is, who you've got responsibility to serve and deliver for, and make sure that those parts are in place. There will be people that will try and derail your track, whether it's politically, it's usually trolls or opposition. And in the workplace, you know, you've always got that colleague that's a little bit snitchy. So, you know, that does happen, but you have to build a plan. So what I always do is when I know that something is going to be tricky, I'll start to think of, okay, then, so I'm coming into a new space. There's this group of people who are not happy and are going to have got nothing great to say. They've been let down a million times. What do I need to do? I'm going to build a list of the most difficult, awkward situations first, and I will approach you first before you need to come to me. So I'm coming to you and saying, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, I just wanted to get your views, how can we do? Head off the hard stuff at the beginning, and people will respect that more rather than waiting for them to come to you. And then sometimes with contractors and other organisations, it's actually going to them and having that conversation. Now I'm you know, in the West Midlands, I chair the MAG, which is a group of cabinet members from across the city, across the region on homelessness, and the mayor allows me to do that. We're not of the same party, so people are like, how do you get government ministers from a different party to speak to you and stuff like that? And I say it's got to be your approach to it. So I say, you know, it's a bit like we're in a bit of an arranged marriage that neither of us want to be in, but we're going to, you know, make the best of it. So it's about making the best of the situation, but being quite strategic in your mind and mapping out who is it that I need to address, how do I need to address them, how do I need to bring people on board to not necessarily my way of thinking, but to make it an easier journey. And I think that's what you have to do, especially with difficult stuff.
Yeah, just talking about contractors, I mean, obviously Birmingham City Council are a huge organisation, and we've worked with the council before, we still do. What conversation do organisations like Willmott, Dixon need to have with the council and yourselves in order to support your role around social mobility? Because obviously, as an organisation, we have a foundation, we have people that want to do good in the community, that want to leave a positive legacy. So what do we need to be saying? How do we need to be engaging to help and be a part of that solution so we can become a trusted partner for yourselves in terms of promoting social mobility, in terms of getting those vulnerable kids out of the situation they're in and really unlocking their potential?
Okay, so I guess outside of the contractual stuff that we always do, there's also looking at what the city objectives are and what we need to do. There's a lot around, obviously there's a lot around the Commonwealth Games at the moment, but also about the stuff that happens in local neighbourhoods. And one thing that I always say particularly when I was in my housing days, when I was working with developers, was we've got a localisation agenda. So if you're going into a local area, it's always good to ask what the local plan is, or the local ward plan is, because sometimes there's things that you can do to support whilst you're in the area, and some of the little things that are taking place that make life good for communities. Sometimes it's about not going in with preconceived ideas, but actually asking the question, what's needed? So, for instance, if I talk about homelessness, on many occasions, organisations like Willmott, Dixon will say to us, oh, well, we've got a couple of, we've got social mobility days, or we've got a few corporate social responsibility days. We want to go and paint a hall. St Basil's will tell me, do you know how much energy it takes for us to risk assess the whole place for everybody to come in and paint this one wall or hand out things? It's actually looking at what your skill is within your organisation that there is to share. They will be more interested in you giving them some pro bono support on something in your expertise on a legal matter than you coming to paint a wall that they can get their volunteers to do anyway. So it's really looking at what expertise that you can share and that you've got to give to share onto different organisations. But the localisation agenda is a big thing for us, and we really want organisations to take part in that. The other thing is also I guess on the skills agenda. So often when developers or contractors come in and construction, they'll start off with the construction jobs and things like that, and that's great, but it's also about looking at is there people within your organisation that actually, some of our grassroots young people who are in disadvantaged areas, they could actually maybe shadow, because maybe some of them have got ambitions to be a project manager but never known what that looks like. One of my bear bugs is there was one time, as being in the housing brief as a female, I sort of exchanged shoes and handbags for hard hats and high-vis jackets. And I remember being on a shoot where, you go along as the cabinet member to take pictures of a development site. And I was stood there and there was 5 men around me and there was 2 women stood over the other side. And I was like, look, if we're going to encourage more women to get into construction, more women to get into the building environment, then we need to make a concerted effort so that it looks and feels like that. And, I actually ended up saying to them, stop the shoot. I'm not taking any more pictures. And I said it in jest. It was taken in good light. And I said, I want those women to come in the pictures. And they were like, but they weren't a part of the project. They're here to support. Before they had a chance to say anything, I was inviting everybody in the picture because we've got to make that concerted effort to make the arena feel like it's accessible to all communities and people that want to work within that industry, particularly those that wouldn't normally.
It's a big ticket for us as an industry. I think, yes, I mean, traditionally, we are and have been in the past. It's changing now, but we have been a male-dominated environment. That is changing, but we still got more work to be done in terms of how we reach out to communities, not just women, but also the BAME community. How do we get more people from the BAME community into the industry? And what do we need to be saying? What do we need to be doing? How do we need to be engaging? Because at the end of the day, there's a rich pool of talent there that we're probably not tapping into. And we, as an industry, need skills. Sustainability of construction relies on skills, future skills. We've got a whole demographic of people retiring in the next 10 years. And we've got something to actually fill that gap of people retiring with new people coming in. And that involves going out to, wider communities and selling construction.
And I think it's definitely about looking at where it is you advertise and stuff. So, for instance, if you're advertising something in The Guardian, Pauline in Ladywood might not be picking that up. If it's something that's in The Voice, which is the African Caribbean newspaper, Pauline from Ladywood might actually pick it up. So I think some of it is about where we're advertising and sharing that information. And I think as the council, we need to get better that when we are working with organisations like Willmott, Dixon, that we are connecting you to community connectors, because the people in the community that will be able to share the information and actually bring people forward. And one of the things that I did when I was a backbench councillor was at the time, I think the Rail College was just opening up. It was around the HS2. And there was a lot of young people that they didn't engage you because they didn't know how to engage with them. That's the bottom line of it. So we set up a partnership with the community members who were trusted, the college, the councillors, and we brought people together. And one of the brief was, these young people are not going to be polished, remember that. And as a result, we had 500 people come through the door throughout the day. That was the highest number of people. But a lot of these young people were people that would not normally engage in events like this. So it's about us being more savvy about partnerships and collaboration and having the right people in the room for the right conversation.
It's almost like us as well, having that proactive conversation with our customers and saying, look, what can we do? We have to reach out to a bigger audience. What can we do through yourselves to connect with that audience? What more can we do? We're doing things here, we're doing things, but there's more to be done. And having that sort of like proactive conversation, because I think that's probably what often lacking. I mean, I'm sure there'll be pockets of good practice in certain councils around the country, but proactively everywhere we need to be having that conversation, that there's people out there deprived, people that don't have the same life opportunities. How do we reach them? How do we get to them in a way which you can really facilitate? Because we've seen in our business people that when they get the opportunity, you're not their potential, and they can make some of their lives, and also they are good for the construction industry. So that's a secret, I think, that we need to really do better. So.
It's about going back to hearts and minds and just thinking out in an alternative way. I've had contractors say to me before, we've advertised for jobs and no one's coming forward. Where did you advertise? The job centre and somewhere else. And I said, okay. So they've sent me a leaflet, and I'm like, turn the leaflet into a JPEG. And they're like, well, why would we turn it into a JPEG? I said, so we can send it to a community member who will then distribute it in WhatsApp. That's how people communicate in the modern world. So it's just about thinking about how to reach people differently, and actually how do we want people to communicate with us. So I think there's lots of lessons to be learnt around the board, but the art of communication is just to ask.
And just one last thing about the councils generally. I mean, you have tremendous challenges ahead with COVID and dealing with that, and obviously the social care and the budget constraints. I mean, what do you think the landscape is going to look like in the next couple of years? I mean, how are councils going to be able to thrive in what is such a challenging environment for everyone?
I think the first thing that we need to do is learn the lessons of through COVID. So I think I'm a big advocate that we need to keep the good stuff. So some of the good stuff is that, you know, many organised, especially councils, who have huge staff members, you know, huge members of staff, you know, none of us thought that we could mobilise an online system as quickly as we did over COVID. Asked us previously, would have told you it would take 5 years and a business plan. So we have to embrace some of the good stuff and make it more fit for purpose. Things like this, you know, I've spoken on conferences all across the country and the world, which I probably wouldn't have done in this manner. So we need to make sure we do that. We need to make sure that we're actually, I think COVID changed the relationship with communities. So almost we became part of the vulnerable entity because we had such a big task ahead of us, and communities stepped up and just started to get on with things. So we really need to take that learning and really change the way that we've moved things, look at system change, look at things that were barriers before, you know, procurement and things like that. So that's essential. But the biggest thing really is around is going to be the recovery of recovery of the city. The economic recovery of the city is going to be such a huge factor. With so many businesses that were on furlough, so many businesses that went under, people becoming unemployed, you know, people have become homelessness and losing their homes. There is so much to consider, and I think it's about being smarter about how we manage our relationships and almost start to think more like a business than a local authority. And engaging, because even for me, as in terms of homelessness, when I still have got the homelessness brief during the pandemic, I worked more with the business community than I ever have with the hospitality community, and that's when we started using the hotels differently. We started looking at the good practice that was going on there, and I think we need to really start to blur some more of those boundaries and stop sitting in separate silos. So I think that's going to be absolutely essential, and I think that we also need as councils to be more willing to write city plans and development plans that actually engage the entire city. So we need to all own it together rather than it being a city council plan.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. I remember, was it 10 or so years ago, the big city plan, it seemed like a tablet stone, and there it is, sort of thing, and without actually being fully engaged with, and is that what the community really wants? And I think that's it. It's got to be bottom up as well as top down sort of thing, hasn't it? Because otherwise you won't get the buy-in, and you'll have that constant friction, and the progress will be stunted because you just won't be able to move forward with it in a way where you want the community to embrace it, thinking that this is going to benefit me. It's not just going to benefit, you know, a few developers. It's got to be a unison thing, hasn't it?
Absolutely, and making sure that our partners are involved with that as well, you know, on the strategic level as well, like sort of places like, you know, organisations like Willmott, Dixon, you know, how are you a part of the picture and of what we're building, and how do we enable you to feel like you're owning a piece of the city pie, so to speak?
Just out of interest, I mean, from your own personal well-being perspective, how do you manage that? Because one of the key tenets of this is about making sure that our people, as they develop and grow, they're busy people, they're very challenged people in terms of the pressures on them. But how do you manage your own well-being so that you don't let it consume you and you become, you know, depressed, and there's all about the whole mental health issue?
Okay, so I thought I managed it quite well. And then COVID took place, and my portfolio at the time was housing, homelessness and bereavement. So you could imagine it was incredibly challenging and stuff. And then I realised a few things being at home, people that I would connect with in the office, and actually developing really bad practice being online. So I don't know about you, Andrew, but I find that when you're online, all of a sudden people, their expectations are higher, so they expect quicker responses to emails. Your meetings are back to back, and you almost feel like you're speed dating around the world by internet. And whereas before you had travel time, walking time and things like that. And then I had to sit down and really restructure my life in terms of my working life, and actually what am I going to continue with. So I had to do more building into my diary, no meeting, thinking time, reading time, and literally slotting things in the diary that gave me breathing space time, so that I wasn't constantly churning from one to the other, and I had that kind of mental space. Also appreciated some of my colleagues more, and I'll tell you a little bit of a story. Was when I was working from home, one day I started to miss a guy called Jeff in the office, and Jeff works in the leader's office. And the reason why I was missing Jeff was because in Jeff's office there's a coffee machine. I used to go for my hot chocolate. Everybody used to go there to get their coffee, but you kind of took for granted that 5-minute chat that we used to have. And I was at home and I going through the meetings and I was not speaking to anybody unless it was about work related stuff. And one day I was like, I just need my hot chocolate with Jeff. And I literally phoned him. He was like, Sharon, I forgot to send you a report. So I just need my hot chocolate with Jeff. And we literally had this 5-minute conversation, and it was like, that was it. So sometimes you just need to build in that break and resilience time, and also be considerate of other people. So I know that, you know, if I'm finding it difficult, the leader must obviously find it difficult. So I would make time to make sure that I check in to see that he's okay. And you have to do that with your team members around you, and actually push yourself as well in a leadership position to not just speak to the people that you're used to speaking to. I would speak to people that I know that have got different vulnerabilities and that this was going to impact them, and they were contacting me. So I built a different set of team around me. I'm a lot more structured around building in that time, resilience time and thinking time, meditation time, and just more so blocking out the noise as well. So I think it's essential, and we have to think about mental well-being when we're at work, because that's essential. And also many people have this used to separate work life and home life, and then when you start working at home, they slowly start to merge. And it's just about being really smart about, well, actually, I work better first thing in the morning. So that will, if I get up earlier and spend that little time, it means that I can get a little bit of time with my son at this time. And just being a bit more considerate about how the two worlds collide. I think that's really important.
Yeah, that really is, isn't it? I think that's the journey we're on as well. We've realised that you can become very consumed, and you have to make that time, that thinking time, and also that personal time, you know, being able to meet people face to face rather than sort of always being on the computer, which is totally different conversation entirely. So I had a really good question actually from Jessica. She said to me just now, you yourself are very positive, but how do you deal with people in your team that perhaps aren't as positive, you know, because we all get people that are a bit, you know, how do you deal with that?
Okay. Right. So at first, when I first come into cabinet, I used to, because I'm quite vision, so I want to think down the track as well. I used to get frustrated. Why does nobody else get this but me? So I used to get a little bit frustrated. And then I realised that I needed to take people on a journey. And then I needed to accept that some people will always say to me, that's not how we do things in local government. When my vision was to change the way we were doing things in local government. So when people, when I've got members of the team or colleagues who don't share the same vision, and I'm responsible for the vision, I'll be as collaboratively as possible with everyone, but I'll also be very clear about, you know, the final, you know, if I have the final decision stops with me, that's where it stops, but I'm trying to be collaborative. But what I also do is one of my aims is that and I literally task myself, got a little bit of a weird mind in that sense, that people who are not on the same page of me, my task is to have them eventually tell me about my idea and trying to sell it to me. And that has happened a couple of times. So when you find, because I'm not really precious about ownership sometimes, so sometimes what you'll find is I've been really banging the drum about things, and sometimes it's not about banging the drum as if you're almost religiously angelic about it, but sometimes it's about the subtle conversations and just making sure you're dropping the certain lines in and the certain way of thinking, that you're doing it subtly, and then the other people start dropping in the same lines, the same mindset, and then eventually what will happen is people start telling you about your idea, and they tell you it's like it's theirs and the first time you've ever heard it. I really think that we should do X, Y, and Z, and I just say, that sounds like a great idea, let's run with that. So I think sometimes it's just about bringing other people on and making them be a part of that picture of not conversion, but helping people along. But it can be frustrating, it doesn't always work. Some people will never want to be on the same journey or vision, and sometimes you've got to accept that that's just okay. as long as they're not disruptive.
If you look up to people that have inspired you, who would you say, what names would you give of people who've inspired you and given you that sort of that energy and drive and purpose that you have?
Okay, so also I don't have role models, but more inspirational, what I call inspirational figures. So if we were talking about, like, you know, big ticket figures that you're never ever going to meet, then Martin Luther King would be my kind of, you know, he would be my inspiration, because it's not, you know, it's just the way that they navigate and bring people along. It's not the actual act of what they do, but it's the way that they've done it. So I will look at people's characteristics and say, actually, those are the characteristics that I would like to build. So that would be one, Martin Luther King. My nan, who was incredible because her work ethic was unbelievable. And a lot of mine are not people that are like famous or anything. The leader of the council, Ian Ward, he's a massive inspirational figure to me, because just through the way of his inclusiveness, his patience, a lot of patience with some of our lot sometimes, and just the way he's navigated his own career. So he went from a driving instructor with no formal education, is now the leader of the council, which I think is phenomenal. Dawn Butler's someone who really inspires me as a black female in politics, because she's very straight to the point, and when you meet her, she's very crystal clear. So yes, there's a number of people, but to be honest with you, a lot of the people that inspire me the most and that I look up to are actually people that I meet. I've got young people that are inspired, that inspire me on a daily basis.
Oh, maybe talking about Dawn Butler, maybe one day you can become an MP, eh?
So yes, a few people have said that to me. And, you know, 2019, I did think about throwing my hat in the ring. But at the moment, I'm really, really focused on, one, my portfolio and making sure that I make an impact in this space and get this right. I'm writing my book, so I'm really focused on that at the moment. So, you know, my long-term political vision, I've not quite mapped out what that looks like, or if there's going to be a long-term political vision for me. But my key thing is just grow and learn at the minute.
I think that grow and learn applies to us all. I mean, everyone listening today, you know, it doesn't matter what age you are, where you are in your career. The only way you can progress and move forward is if you learn all the time, pick up new things, be inspired by new people, find out what they're doing. Hopefully, like today, you know, pick up some ideas around inspiration, how you do things that they can just impart in their own day-to-day lives, because those incremental little changes will make such a big difference over time, won't they?
Yeah, they do make a difference over time. And it's just, do you know, it's just also that thing of just being, we've all got to be responsible. We've got to be responsible individuals and citizens. You know, people will say to me that they'll say to me, oh, your story is really inspiring, or you're very inspirational. Do you know what? We can all be inspirational. We've all got the power to inspire someone. And it is always about how you, in our personal and professional lives, there are things that are just uncontrollable that we have not got control over, but there are things that we have got control over. One is how we show up in life, and two is that when we have setbacks or things go wrong, it's not what happened, it's how you recover from that. And it's about being clear that, you know, that you're a get up and goer. You know, that's what we need to do. But we've all got the ability to inspire people, and I think sometimes, you know, if people are too adoring of me, then it will make me, you know, I don't want to get arrogant in the middle of it and lose who I am, believe in my own hype. But also that, you know, that I want people to believe that they've got that little something in themselves that is inspiring to other people and those that are around them.
Well, I mean, I must admit, this past hour has just flown by. I mean, we'd probably carry on for hours more, couldn't we? But that's been brilliant. I mean, from start to finish, I've just been thinking, wow, you know, what a really fascinating conversation, and I'd love to carry on. But I appreciate, you know, an hour is an hour. But I just want to say thank you very much for your time. Honestly, it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. I know the colleagues listening have also got some great feedback already on the chat, and you know, we'll record it, so we'll make it available to other people too. You know, hopefully I'll get to Birmingham in the next couple of weeks, and I'll take you out for lunch. And as my wife said, thank you for your time, because I really appreciated it.
No, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I've really appreciated it. So thank you everyone for listening to me for a whole hour. I hope you have a great day, and I'll look forward to maybe joining you again in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Sharon.
Okay, take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Bye.